Welcome to Cars on Call. I am Steve Schutz, automotive journalist, and I'm here with a wonderful co-host. It's been a couple weeks. We have the bearded Dr. Stephan Moran, our trauma surgeon. We are the
Sure.
only podcast who's got a trauma surgeon to talk about car safety. Stephan, how are you?
I'm doing great. Well, yeah, just actually trimmed the beard, but my wife can't wait for me to get back into the Air National Guard, so I have to shave this off. But I was in Big Sky, Montana on a snowmobile and also did some skiing, and I enjoyed having this very much because it was about 10 degrees and snowing. So my face stayed warm.
Cool. Adams Hudson, car
Cleanly
consultant.
shaven.
Yeah, me too.
With the two
Yeah.
Porsches behind you today.
Yeah, 993, 991. So you got the 991 5.0 and
Yeah.
Adam's car consultant,
That's the boss.
collector, and just expert. So, Adams, how are you?
You're doing great, doing great. Part of the reason they came inside is that we had a snowstorm in Florida. It wasn't enough to go snowmobiling on like Stefan was doing, but we did actually have 5 inches of snow in Northwest Florida. So these came in and have not left yet. My wife's Subaru is outside, which I think is fitting.
Yeah, you think of South Florida snowstorm, that's a euphemism for a cocaine party, but I guess in your case it's not.
You know, or sometimes they say, when a place like this snows, that there's bad things afoot. But it was great. It was fun to watch. It was interesting to watch. I didn't get out in it, but
I
anyway.
saw some beautiful pictures of the beach. A friend of mine got up at
Yeah,
sunrise and took a picture of the beach in the morning. It was absolutely spectacular.
It
it's
looked like
amazing.
alien landscape, but it was fun. So all good
Yeah.
down here.
There was a video of a guy snowboarding down the famous bridge in Charleston, South Carolina. I forgot the name of it, but oh, look at that picture. But
With the
yeah,
snow.
snow where there shouldn't be snow. It's amazing.
Yeah, palm trees in the snow is an unusual sight.
Yeah, I'm gonna show you one more picture from my friend David Rowe. There you go. Look at that picture.
Incredible.
Sunrise with the downtown Orange Beach, man. Just spectacular.
All right. Well, we're going to talk Formula One. We're going to talk muscle cars. We're going to talk Audi, and we got a lot of really good stuff. And we're just going to talk. But Stefan, you're dying to talk about Formula One. As everybody knows, this is kind of the silly season where people move around, and there's been a lot of action. Formula One, which is newly popular in the US, a lot happening, Stefan, and your favorite team, Red Bull, also has some changes, but he hates Red Bull. Stefan, bring us up to date with Formula One. What's going on and what are you excited about?
So I'm just gonna go. I'm gonna bring up. Here we go. Bring this up. And what this is, yeah, I'm super excited about Formula One this year. I think this is going to be a major league year for Formula One in terms of viewership, internationally as well as the United States. And what I have here is this is United States viewership, NASCAR, IndyCar, and F1. And you can see NASCAR has continued a downward trend the last couple of years. IndyCar is pretty much stable with a little bit of a downtrend in the last year as well, but they were pretty rising before that. But if you look at F1, F1 had a kind of a meteoric rise in the 2020 and then in 2024, a little bit over 2023. But I think this year we're going to see F1 even really further surpass IndyCar, and we'll probably have the highest viewership ever in the United States on Formula One. A couple
And hey,
reasons.
Steph,
Yeah.
man, I'm from the outside looking in here, and that's a great chart because I've wondered about these numbers because you do hear about NASCAR's decline. Is this the first year in F1 has ever been more highly viewed than IndyCar? I see that just
Yeah,
crossed
it
over.
crossed over. It did cross over in 24. Yes. Data only goes back to 2018, so I can't speak before that. But
Okay.
I would say IndyCar always was United States was had higher viewership than F1 until this last year.
Yeah,
Yep.
think back to the Indy 500 in the 60s,
Yep.
70s, and 80s. Everybody watched it. The
Yep.
viewership was gigantic. By the way, the NASCAR thing, let me just throw this out there. John Deere, the tractor company, has a rule for their if you have a John Deere franchise, you may run it and you may give it to your next generation and they can run it. but that's it. You must, at that point, sell it back to John Deere because they do not want the third generation running a John Deere franchise. It's against their rules. Well, you had Bill France Sr., Bill France Jr. They both did a great job. Stefan, doesn't it seem like ever since they
Hmm.
gave it to the third generation, it went to shit?
Third generation, and also when they went to this basic, I think spec series, the car of this, what is this new car that they have? It's basically a spec series. I think people have just lost interest.
You mean with
Um,
the COTY, that one?
yeah, the car
Yeah,
tomorrow. Yeah.
yeah.
So I think that's it. But a couple other things coming up. We've got Drive to Survive. The Netflix series is going to premiere on 7 March, and I think it's going to their viewership has gone down the last couple years, but it's still a highly anticipated show. We've got Brad Pitt's movie coming out on June 27th, F1, and this is getting a lot of hype. And I think this is going to be big for Formula One. But the one thing
What's
we
the name?
can,
What's the movie is not Thelma and Louise 2, right? This is
yeah,
what's the name of the movie?
F1,
All right.
F1. And then here's the one thing I want to bring up. Here's a picture of Lewis Hamilton in front of Ferrari's building with an F40. This picture on Instagram got 5.6 million views. Okay. I mean, that is huge. And Lewis Hamilton, in my mind, the GOAT, right up there in Senna. 7-time world champion. One was stolen from him. If that, and I believe that he's going to reinvigorate Ferrari. And it's just gone crazy. There's not every day there's pictures, and he's been rejoined with his trainer. And I think it's going to be a massive year for Formula One. I hope it's not a letdown for Lewis driving a brand new car with the expectations too high. Michael Schumacher helped Ferrari win their first F1 championship 17 years ago. They'd had a dry slump. So I think F1 is just going to take off this year, and I think the viewership's going to go way up. We've got 3 races in the United States. Testing starts in 2 weeks, and then the first race is the second weekend of March. And I just think if you got any interest in F Formula One, this is going to be the year to watch. I think it's going to be a hugely spectacular year. Red Bull's not going to be as competitive, which is great. So I'm super excited. I just couldn't be more. I love F1, but this year seeing Lewis in a red suit was just, I just loved it. I think it was fantastic.
Well, they keep the drama high too, the human interest side, independent of automobiles, which I think is what the Netflix series has done. You don't even have to care about cars too much. You don't have to care that much about racing. You're just sort of like watching the personalities and the teams and the money and the power and the popularity sort of all swap places. And I think that human drama has got a lot of people fired up.
I
Yeah,
absolutely.
it's really true. And the cars are fast. The girlfriends are all spectacularly beautiful. There's nothing not to like about Formula One on TV.
It's
Absolutely.
interesting. I don't know if we always do this, we sort of get into a little bit of a topic, and I know the least about F1 of anybody here. But it used to be strictly the champagne and caviar crowd. You didn't even need to try to hold a conversation with anybody about F1 because you didn't know anybody who was into it. And it has just gotten to be, to me, way more popular and sort of collectively interesting, maybe in the last 3, 4 years that anybody talks about F1. I know that the one in Austin was a big eye opener for a lot of people in the US, but it was still a fairly esoteric crowd.
Well, here's the one thing that I like about F1 that I think makes, if you have any interest in automotive sports or racing, is first of all, they're 2 car teams, and they're going for the driver championship as well as the constructor championship. So 2 very important different championships. So there's a lot of dynamics that comes into play in the team is who's going to be their number one driver versus number two. And then the cars are identifiable. The teams have the exact same color and livery. The only difference is the number on the car, which is very small. So it's easy to see, oh, the green car, that's Aston Martin. The red car, that's Ferrari. Oh, that's a silver, that's a Mercedes. On down the line, the papaya is a McLaren. So it makes it easy to watch and
Hmm.
figure out who's leading and who's not leading. And I've tried to watch MotoGP. I've tried to watch IndyCar. And I have a hard time figuring out who is who because of all the stickers and they're not monochrome colors, kind of like the F1. And F1 is just easy. You can pick up and say, yep. It's like watching football. You got two different color teams, and it's very easy to see who's playing here. Except there's more than two teams, but I think it's easy to watch and it's easy to get excited about. And then once you attach to the personalities and these superstars, it's a fascinating sport to me.
There's a lot of storylines this year. The number one storyline, of course, is Lewis Hamilton going to Ferrari. You know what's interesting about that? He's won 7 championships. And what typically happens, and this is every sport, but especially a sport that is as physically demanding as this one, and there's really no other sport beside motor racing that has this kind of danger. Eventually, what happens is, you win a few championships, and then you have a couple children, and you're not quite as fit. You put on a little bit of weight, and then most importantly, you don't go 10 tenths through the turn. You go 9.5 tenths through the turn because you're thinking you don't want to leave your wife a widow and your kids not having a dad, and you lose your edge. Lewis Hamilton has no children, and he's just as fit as he ever was.
And I think I have to say about Lewis that he got robbed of his eighth championship. So he's tied with Schumacher. He wants 8 championships. He's driven
Uh,
for that.
okay, Stefan,
All
he
right.
was not robbed. There was a disagreement about
You might have
what
a
the
domestic
safety
dispute
car
brewing.
and where the Red Bull was supposed to be. I thought it was pretty reasonable what happened. It was debatable, but even if you think he was robbed, and I don't, I think it's just how that final race played out. A great champion would never let himself get so close that there wasn't room for an error by officiating. He should have been farther ahead where that little thing that happened. And again, I didn't think it was as outrageous as all the Hamilton fans. That shouldn't have made so much of a difference. He should have still won. He should have had a cushion.
Well, we're not going to get into that.
Well,
It was a
Wait,
restart
wait,
on used tires. Okay.
wait,
All
right.
right.
We got into that when it happened. We had a
All right.
disagreement
Next
then.
topic. All right. Let's move on.
well,
But
but the
for the
parallel
record,
to that from a football fan is you cannot call a game on one bad officiating
that's my
call.
point. Yeah, it's the same
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
And when we talked about what happened, you didn't use with the word robbed. So instead of mellowing with time,
I'm still angry about it.
you're more angry.
We got screwed over. All right.
All
This
right.
few years stuff.
We're gonna move on to. I mean, I'm very interested in that. I'm very interested to see how Red Bull does without their design master Adrian Newey, and of course the Lewis Hamilton to Ferrari story is going to be really really great. All right, on to muscle cars, and we kind of talked about this, Adams, when you talked about the Kissimmee Mecum auction about a month or so ago. But talk about it more. Here's what I tell people, and muscle cars. We all love muscle cars, but if you think about it, as far as kind of the sociology, the last time American cars were really, really cool was muscle cars. And then that was the late 60s, early 70s. And then they were no longer cool. Nothing, honestly, since the muscle cars to now, the only American car that came along where people were like, this is really cool is unfortunately Tesla. And I don't think it's cool, but other people do. They bring it up at cocktail parties and things like that. And that's why this period still resonates.
Yeah, and I agree with you that there wasn't a lot of cool that came out after it, other than the shirt that you're wearing right now, the 93 Cobra SVT, correct? In some
Well,
fantastic
here's what I
turbo.
really mean. Like this car, there's the best Fox body Mustang. I think Stefan would agree with that. The SVT Cobra of 1993. But what I mean is that this car enthusiasts think it's cool. Muscle cars, everybody thought it was cool.
And I agree. And I did not mean to take any shine off your point. You're exactly right. There was so much going on in muscle cars in the era, and a lot of people would call that era, if you're not in the muscle car world, maybe 64. John DeLorean's GTO would have been like, okay, boom, there's the bellwether that indicates this next period. Up to about 73-ish. There you go, right there with the red line tires showing through and all that cool stuff. That would have been a 389 tri-power car, and it was just big engine, mid-size body. That was kind of the magic formula. And back to Steve's shirt, that particular car was sort of harkening back to like, hey, we're back to the muscle car. When that car came out, it was not trying to be something new. It was like, hey, we're cool again because we are looking back over our shoulder. So there's the beginning of it. And there would be maybe the peak years would be 1970. Probably a lot of people call that the high water mark. That's when horsepower ratings were a little bit different. They would have used uh, DIN versus net, and it's a different sort of calculation, mainly to sort of try to trick the insurance companies, which did not work. And then probably by 73, maybe that next photo. But yeah, there you go. That was kind of, to me, kind of the last good effort, even though it was way down on power. That would have been an ST 455 Trans Am of 73, that car in Brewster green. Just a gorgeous looking car. But that era, if you look at it, 64 to 73, not quite even 10 years. And people will stretch it and say, oh no, the letter Hemi cars of the 50s. Sure, I hear you. That's not the real core part of this muscle car. So, muscle car era. So if you just say like the peak year was 70. And if you were a 16-year-old in 1970 lusting for a car you could not get, here you are now, you're 72. And I
Hmm.
think the basics of your birth certificate date are dictating what's going on in the market. I'm not trying to be all negative about it, but I mean the guy who's 72 now, he's thinking less about burnouts and a hell of a lot more whether his mobility scooter is charged. So,
That's right.
so that, that's
Yeah.
kind of where that era
Wow.
is.
Yeah. So, like my
What a way to
grandfather's,
put it.
yeah. I think, every era has its card. My grandfather would have been the brass cars or the doozies,
Yeah.
Duesenbergs. And then my father was all about the 55 Chevy. I mean, when's the last time you even saw a 55 Chevy? If you saw it, you're like, gross. But they were back in car shows in the 90s, it was all about the 55 Chevys.
Man, you're
And
right.
and then our age group, I have great nostalgia for the muscle cars, particularly the Mustangs. But honestly, you get in, you drive one of those, a Toyota Corolla drives nicer
Yeah.
than any of that stuff. So if you don't have an emotional attachment that's somewhere in your growing up, that you have a visceral response to these vehicles, you may say, "Oh yeah, that's a cool car," but if you don't have that visceral response and you drive it, you're going to be like, "This really doesn't drive that nice." Now, I did drive Jack
Right.
Roush's 69 429 Boss Mustang, and he's had that thing. I mean, it's perfectly restored. It drove really nice, but that's had a lot of work on it. But your average car from that era, unless it's had a 100-point restoration, if you haven't done something to the transmission, to the shocks, the spray, everything, I mean, finely tuned it, it's gonna go down the road barely in your lane. And I can
No,
see
I
why
think
people
I
aren't
think
attracted to it.
I think you're right, and you bring up a great point because a lot of people now, they take these old muscle cars and they drive and go, wow, what a pig. And then they put electric power steering on. They put an air conditioner that works. They put brakes that'll actually stop the car. I mean, a lot of these cars had drum brakes on the rear. I mean, you're talking about stagecoach technology on some of this stuff, and they didn't care about going around turns. The bias-ply tires, it didn't really matter. But I think we're getting slightly off topic, but I think it's worthy of mentioning is that the people who've sort of stretched the muscle car era into the validity and relevance of a current day auction are doing resto mods. It
Yes.
looks the old part and it's got the stage presence of the old part, but it has the ability to actually navigate traffic and do modern things of a new car. And fuel injection, et cetera, has done a lot of that. And so there's almost a dividing line between people who like carburation under the hood and those who like fuel injection. That happened maybe late 70s, early 80s when cars started really making that shift. And I feel like the true muscle car era is kind of in, not to be over cute with the analogy, is in the rearview mirror. I saw these cars at Kissimmee, which is more known as kind of a muscle car, American big iron kind of show. They just didn't have the eyeball traffic. I mean, there would be 10 people looking at an Accord or a Civic Si, and there'd be three people looking at a run of the mill, and I'm talking about the plain Jane, the run of the mill base Challenger, base Barracuda. And I feel like that's probably just an indication of what's coming. Now, this is not all about, oh, is it going to be worth the money down the line and all about the investment. If you're looking at an investment, I think the hero cars, the Hemi stuff, the Superbirds and the Challengers and the Cudas with the Hemi, the and there's a great image of a AMX and a big bad color, what they call the big bad colors. And some of the 427 Corvettes, the Z28 Camaros, Trans Ams, a lot of those hero cars are going to do well. The base models are just, I think, just going to die the slow death that Stefan mentioned of what they call the Tri-5s, 55, 6, 7 Chevrolets. They're just not going to be relevant to anybody. They just don't sort
Right.
of matter.
Yeah,
So,
I just had an idea because I think you're right, Adams. These things, they don't matter at all like they used to. But one thing I think is interesting is they've had a longer shelf life. I think they were cooler and desirable longer than, let's say, the hot rods of the 50s, and the chop top, the hot
yeah.
rods. They kind of came and went, and they didn't have the same legs, the same longevity in people's desirability as the muscle cars. And I just thought of this, but I think it's true. In the 60s, if you were 16 years old, you really, really lusted after those muscle cars. They were so cool. And in the 80s, if you're 16 years old, oh my gosh, a BMW 3 Series, an Alpina, maybe a 911, an AMG Mercedes. There were some really cool German cars that just knocked your sock off and that you were desired. There was really nothing in the 70s. I can think of only one car in the 70s, and I'm talking the post muscle car. So 74 to, let's say, 81, 82. The only car that I looked at and said that's really cool, and it wasn't even that cool, was the Smoking the Bandit Trans Am.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Think of another one. This whole 70s sucked. 78, we talked about the Corvette with 150 horsepower. I was 16 then. I was 16 in the late 70s, and there was nothing that really spoke to me. And the 80s was different. The 60s was so I think because of that, the muscle car had more legs.
No, I think that's a great point, and I feel like not trying to double make the resto mod, but I feel like that movement, the resto mod movement, really gave some elasticity to what was even acceptable to drive around in. It's funny you say that, Steve, because I remember also very well late 70s going off to college, and when the pace car edition, one of the 50 pace car things that Corvette has done, I was almost embarrassed.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember going, oh, I wish I liked that, but I hate it.
Yeah, it
The
was
era has
terrible.
passed. So what do we have for the future? If you're into it, if you love the muscle car era and you still kind of want to get that one that speaks to you and you're of an age that you could actually enjoy it, buy a hero car. Now, if you're looking at the money, if you're not looking at the money, go get yourself a midline Chevelle or a Buick GS or an Olds 442 or something like that. And this slide here is really just showing that some of the collections, this being of the Wellborn collection, Alabama-based collector in mostly Mopar, like heavily known as Mopar, he's sold quite a few. He has thinned his herd a bit, and he didn't get to his status by being dumb, and he is probably thinning out to the stuff that he likes to cull down to just the things that bring him joy and let these other ones sort of ride. And you wonder, well, is that like an indication of what's going on in the broader market? And that's what we're asking.
Well, we will certainly see. I really have a lot of nostalgia for these cars. And Stefano, you have a nostalgia for the 60s because you're having a Cobra built from the 60s.
Yeah, I know. Listen to Adams. I think they're always, the hero cars, but I would add to the hero cars, there's cars of certain design and shape that are iconic.
Yeah.
And, I'm building a Cobra, and that car looks as good today as it looked when Carroll Shelby built them. And looking behind you, Adams, I see the 911s. And you think about, you can do a one-line sketch draw one line, a piece of paper, and someone's going to say that's a 911.
Mhm. Yeah.
They may not tell you which year. So I think when it comes to cars, I got thinking about this. The classic design shape of certain cars, the Mustang has been pretty true to its basic shape. The Porsche has been very true to its shape. But I think cars that today are still carrying the same nameplate, that's always going to make them desirable because somebody that owns a new one, then they start traveling back in time to their kids and they want the one they had when they were a kid. And the Mustangs have always had a huge following and they're still very collectible. And then a lot of people turn them into restos. The Corvette has really morphed, went from I think going from front to mid-engine, I think is really probably going to hurt the overall long-term collectability of Corvettes because they've lost that iconic shape that they had. But I think that's kind of, I start thinking about this, what's still gonna be relevant? And most of these muscle cars, people don't even know the name of these cars.
Yeah.
The nameplates don't exist, but iconic nameplates, Porsche, Mustang, Corvette. I think those are going to be the ones that people may still think are interesting that that's not in their age group wheelhouse. But what's amazing to me is that when I go out and drive my Bullet Mustang, that it doesn't matter. Anybody that knows anything about cars, whether there's 13, 16, 30, 40, 50, 60, they're like, wow, a Bullet. So there are certain heroes and I think if we're not investing in collections, but you're right. The rest of these, really, who cares? It's somebody that just is building a collection to have a collection. But in terms of, it's desirable for that collector, but general large population desirability, it's gone for these, just like the 55 Chevys.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Time.
I love that people are enthusiastic when they see you in the Bullet.
Oh,
I
it
Yeah.
love.
doesn't matter where I go.
I'm
They're
so
like
glad to hear that.
people taking pictures going down the interstate, and I pull in to get gas, and they're like, "Wow, that's a Bullet." And it's just, I think it's amazing. I think it's Steve McQueen. They probably don't know about Steve McQueen, but they know about the Bullet.
Yeah.
And it's pretty cool. It's amazing, but I think there's that attachment to that name and that nameplate and the fact that it's a Mustang and they've been building them since
Well,
65. So,
some will transcend, that's for sure. Some will rise to
yes,
the top. The cream always does, but I think that largely, I think we have seen sort of the end of an era.
yes,
Yeah.
I absolutely agree.
I agree. All right. I'm going to talk a little bit about Audi because Audi saw a 14% sales drop 2023 to 2024. That's a big drop in a rising market. And it's really a shame. I wanted to talk about this because we all of us love Audis. But this, I think, encapsulates the problem. There's a picture of a 2009 Audi Q5. That's the year that it was introduced. And if you scroll down, there it is, a 2009. Scroll down, there's a 2025
Good gosh.
Audi Q5. And if you
Point
scroll down, you
made.
see the rear view. It's the same. It's the same
Yeah.
platform. It's the same everything. They've changed the lights. They've changed the grill. It's the same car. It's exactly the same, and and basically the same engine. It's a 2.0 liter, four cylinder. It's the same damn car for how do you justify that? If you have an iconic car like the 911 we were talking about, okay, it makes sense to keep it the same for 16 years, although they don't. They update it all the time.
Yeah.
This is embarrassing. And in the 90s, Audi became really great. They came out with the A4 sedan, beautiful interior and lighting. So, good driving experience, beautiful interior, beautiful dashboard, beautiful lighting, very distinctive, understated, elegant design, and that carried them. They grew like crazy. They went from selling something like 23,000 cars in 1993, and now they're up 200,000 or so a year. Huge, huge growth because of elegance, understated design, beautiful interiors, and beautiful lighting. Okay, that's fine, but you cannot sit on a Q5 for 16 years and not change it. This is not an iconic sports car. This is a crossover, people mover, regular car. It's embarrassing. And I know why it happened. They spent so much money on their electrical cars and electrification that they neglected their internal combustion engine cars. But now with BEV sales sagging and they have to go to hybrid because BEVs really are sagging and almost going away to be replaced by plug-in hybrids. Now they have to turn, but they should have made this, they should have continued to invest in their internal combustion engines. That's why their sales dropped 14%. I love Audi, and this just makes me so disappointed.
I agree. I tell you, and we all remember when Audi emerged from the ether of the bad, the unintended acceleration, and then it kind of became, an also ran. Oh, isn't that sort of like a Volkswagen or sort of like a Mercedes? No, it's right in between. And I think the understated elegance is a great spot that they occupy because they were not a Mercedes with a much older demographic. They were not a BMW, which I know you're a BMW fan, but if you run a BMW, some people say, I don't want to look like I'm trying too hard. The Audi fit that slot perfectly. And then they go and just dominate the living crud out of Le Mans for about
Yep.
eight
Yes.
solid years and can't do anything but take home new hardware for the trophy shelf in that era. Well, all these wonderful things, these highlights that you're hitting on, but you cannot fall asleep at the wheel in the automobile industry because, yeah, we love them because of all the things that automobiles invoke about, the passion, the mechanics, the engineering, the racing. To a lot of people, they're fashion. And there ain't any dress our wives have right now that's 15 years old.
Right.
It has.
That's a great, sorry.
Well, no, go on with it. But I'm just saying, like, if you're trying to be fashionable and current, you can't do that for 15 years.
No, and I think another reason you need to be fashionable and keep up and change the car is that the way a lot of people buy these cars is they do not buy them, they lease them. At least half, probably 60, 70%, depends on the year, of Audis are leased. And what happens is you do a 3-year lease, you bring it in. I've got a great friend who's a dermatologist. Every 3 years, he's been leasing forever. And he's very, very happy. It's never out of warranty. You never have to worry about reliability. And every 3 years, you get something new and different. But what if the thing that's new and different is the same?
It's like, how do you justify it?
Well, I think you get bored and you say, I'm going to release an X3. It's the same. Sometimes it's the same dealership. It's just a showroom away. You walk over and you say, I'm going to lease an X3 and it's going to be a similar payment. Why not?
Yeah.
And I mentioned it before, I think the other thing, and they've done this with all the other models. They're all cookie cutter. They come in extra small, small, medium, and large, and they all look the same.
Yes.
And so it's kind of like, yeah, if you're gonna be spending that kind of money, you want a little bling, a little something that people know that, oh yeah, that's the new one. You show up in this, and you could have one spread. It's 5 years old, 3 years old, 2 years old, 1 year old. People are going to think there's nothing new about it. But yeah, I'd sad. I mean, here, pull up a picture here. We had an A6. This is not the that's an A4, but we had an A6 Quattro wagon, which was just a gorgeous vehicle. It was reliability was not good, but
Yeah, Audis get to a point where they
yeah.
start to sort of cost you in $1,000 increments.
Well, yeah, back in 2000, it was when no matter what happened, if I took it in, it was $500. It
Yeah.
just everything was $500, and
Yeah.
but it just drove me crazy.
It's
But
mission impossible. This message will self-destruct in 60
yeah,
seconds. That's the
Yeah.
Audi. It's at some
Yeah.
point, it's going
Yeah.
to
yeah,
self-destruct.
yep, and it did. I'm trying to find a picture here, but I can't
But
find
if
a
you
picture.
but if you lease it, it's no big deal. But again,
Yep.
why would you want to have, you get a brand new Q5 and then you go to, a lot of women drive these and the woman goes to her stylist and her stylist has a 2010. It looks the same. All right,
They
Stefan,
sort
you
of,
wanted to,
they're losing their way a little bit
yeah,
right now. They need to get back on, and we're fans. We're Audi fans, people.
Yep.
They
I
need to get
completely,
back on the trend.
yeah, Stefan, you wanted to talk about something else. I actually forgot what it was.
I had a little thing on safety that we can be brief about it. I think it's important. Um, if you want to, I can go through that a little bit.
Uh,
Or is there something? Oh no, the new news from Ford. Is that what you want
yeah,
to talk about? The Ford. That's right. You're wearing We'll do safety next time. It's ADAS, something you don't even want to talk about. But no, so you got that Ford t-shirt. So Ford did a little tease this week that there's going to be a new Mustang model for next year. And
The
people are
Mach
saying,
E, I can't wait.
wait,
I think I know what it is, Stefan, but let's hear about it.
but it's the 2025 Mustang and they're calling it the 1969. And what people are thinking this is going to be is I've seen different iterations of AI on the internet, but I think it's going to be a Boss Mustang. They haven't released a Boss since 2010, I think. So I think, we had the Dark Horse, we had the Bullet, we had the Mach 1, and I think it's time for a Boss. I've seen all the AI stuff and some of it's good, some of it's not so good. But Ford has not kind of released any pictures or designs yet, but they just said the 1969. So I'm thinking probably a Boss.
So here's a question. It was like a certainty 6 months ago that the next cool Mustang was going to be a Safari. So they were going to have the internal combustion engine, basically a V8 Ford GT, but it was going to be lifted, four-wheel drive, kind of like a Porsche 911 Dakar. Is that not going to happen, Stefan?
I haven't heard anything about it, and I haven't visited my buddy Jack Roush or talked to him in a while to see if he's been doing any development work on that. But I don't know. I just think that's such a limited segment. I just can't see the point in it.
You wonder if they just floated that out there to see what the market response was. Just
Mm,
Well, they did the Safari and the Mustang Mach-E, um, some Safari version of that. But
yeah.
you almost never see charging stations in the middle of the desert. I don't know, but I don't go to the desert that much. So Steph,
yeah.
on the 1969, do we think that it's going to have any GTD-ish
Yeah.
body look or
See,
anything?
I have seen the AI I have seen on that exactly is got some kind of to me it looks like it's more like a 69 fastback Mustang
Cool.
than anything else, and I thought that was really cool. But Steve-O was talking about here. Let me get Steve-O was talking about I think I here it is. I just found the pic I was looking for on the new the Safari that's going to be released. Let me share this. Where's share at? Shoot. Ah, there it is, share. Here we go. I found it. Yeah, I think this is the Safari Mustang that Steve-O was talking about.
And that looks
So,
like Wetumpka, Alabama to me.
so this is actually the Falkville exit, and I took this picture. This is, ladies and gentlemen, this is a fox-bodied 4x4 Mustang that's jacked up about 6 feet in the air.
Uh,
And I saw this and I was like, oh my God, this is, but yeah, but glad I was able to find that picture.
Yeah,
that,
that's why. That's
But
awesome.
that's thanks to the new Apple AI, artificial intelligence in photos. You can go into photos and hit the search window. I typed in Mustang, and this picture was one of 12 that popped up. How cool is
Yeah,
that?
that's super cool. That's so great.
But yeah.
Well, I have a couple little mini rants that I want to, they're not really
Ah.
rants, but just observations, and I want to throw them out there for you guys and tell me if you guys agree with this. I beat up Stellantis before. I'm not going to do that again. But I will say this.
oh, please do.
I have observed that if you see a Dodge Hornet, one of the most boring, stupid designs ever, if you see a Dodge Hornet, 100% of the ones I've seen, 100% are rental cars. If you see a Jeep Grand Wagoneer or Wagoneer, it's almost always a rental car, almost
Yep.
always. Stellantis cars are just, as far as I'm concerned, consigned to the rental fleet now. That must be most of their sales. I don't know that, but it just seems that way, right? Have you guys noticed that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I agree with that. I don't know if you guys have followed. Seinfeld has a routine where he talks about the stuff that you buy for your house, and then that thing is either outdated or displaced, and then it moves to the attic, and it stays in the attic a while until other stuff takes its place, then it's displaced into the garage, and it stays in the garage a while, and then it's just displaced into the storage room, and then finally it becomes junk. So he says, really, all we are is a very slow garbage disposal unit. That's
Yeah.
what your house is. To me, the whole Stellantis name is about to the rented storage part of the processing.
Yeah.
They are 1 foot in the grave unless they do something drastic because the rental fleet means regular people don't want them at their house. That's what that means to me.
Right.
Yeah, I completely agree. And if you've seen the new Charger Daytona, it's called, they went from 100%. It is like it reminds me of the I used to watch the show The Wire, and there was a
Oh yeah.
guy, he was one of the most successful drug dealers in Baltimore, and then he got shot and he's in a home and they go visit him and he's like in some like sitting on a commode almost just in a home and he can't hardly talk and he's emaciated. That's what this is. They took the Charger with full of personality, full of performance, and now it's a hybrid and it's embarrassing. It's a shadow of its former self. It's got none of the swagger, none of the anything.
And here's the headline: Dodge is already pushing cheap Charger lease deals.
Already. I think
Already
that's the most damning word in that whole sorry headline is already.
on a
So
brand
okay,
new vehicle.
so that makes sense to me, all right? So sure, Stellantis cars, as they make them stupid, they're going to go to the rental fleet. But Stefan, you'll be surprised by this. At least out here, out west, uh, lots, and I'm going to say half of the new Genesis cars I've seen are rentals.
Really?
Lexus, when they started, they said we will never rent. You can never rent a Lexus. And 35 years later, you still can never. You can't rent a Lexus. What the hell is Genesis doing, Stefan? Renting out their cars. I've seen tons of rental SUVs mostly and some sedans.
The only thing I could think that Genesis would be trying to do that is to get people into it that would never consider it. So instead of renting, an Escalade or instead of renting a high-end Expedition or Explorer, you get the Genesis sedan. And one of my partners had a Genesis sedan, and I mean the SUV, and it was fantastic. I mean, that would be the only thing I could think that limited as when you go to run a car, they have some luxury vehicles you can choose from. Perhaps that's what they want to do. But I don't know.
That's interesting thing that you would notice here, Steve, because like if Genesis is trying to be the Lexus to the Toyota, which the Genesis would be to the Kia Hyundai, you would think they would consider it a little bit more sacred ground. Because if they're attempting to sort of follow that model, and I think it's no secret they're following that model, they have made a decent misstep here. And I agree with Steph's point too. I think they're just trying to get volume out there and introduce it to people who wouldn't ordinarily sit behind the wheel of
Yeah,
one. But I don't think it's done their branding any favors.
yeah.
Yeah. And then really quickly, I'll just throw this out and you guys can tell me about your regions. Uh, I drove the new Land Cruiser, which is not the real 300 series Land Cruiser. It's the North American Land Cruiser, and it's the Land Cruiser Prado and the rest of the world. I thought it was okay. I thought it looked good, but it wasn't great to drive. The quality inside was kind of mediocre. I thought it was just average. I have not driven the GX 550 Lexus, which is basically the same thing with a slightly different, a tweaked body. But those two cars, Land Cruiser, the new Land Cruiser, and the GX 550 Lexus, as far as I can tell, they are huge hits. I see them all over the place, both of them.
I haven't seen one yet.
I'm trying to think if I have. I don't, I probably saw it at Kissimmee just because that's where all the new car kind of stuff is out. People were out there in them. I haven't seen one in the wild, just in its own world, and I'm disappointed to hear that the quality. Steve, I'm sort of like reading between the lines what you said. They've gone down market
Yeah.
with the Land Cruiser.
Yeah, Land Cruiser used to be, the same thing as like the new LX 600 is based on the 300 series Land Cruiser that's the rest of the world. But the Land Cruiser they lowered the price. The Land Cruiser used to be $85,000. The new one is like 65 to
Mhm.
start. Maybe I think it's around 65. So it's a lot cheaper. So you expect it to be not quite the same. It's got a four-cylinder hybrid. But yeah, the quality of the materials is not what it used to be. It's a disappointment. Lexus looks great. I think it's a great looking vehicle, the Lexus GX. And we're in the mountains here. I guess you'd expect to see more. I thought maybe in Birmingham or Florida you would see more.
That
Us-
or it's so non-discreet. I haven't seen. I mean, I haven't noticed it. I noticed the Santa Fe's, which I know is probably your second rant. I've noticed the new Santa Fe's.
I just put out there that when I saw pictures of it, and we talked about this probably a year ago, we both agreed it was great looking. It was different and
Yes.
good looking. And now a year later, I'm like, it's different and bad looking. I think they're ugly. And it's polarizing, and I guarantee you, one or both of you guys will think it's good
Okay.
looking. But I've changed my mind.
Let me tell you why I have to agree with you, and the thing that I'm disappointed with. It has one thing. If you, I just here's a picture of it.
It's
Let me click
it's
that up.
funny. I have a bone to pick
Okay.
about this too, and I
It
can't
has the
see
Chevy
it.
CK pickup wheel wells around the tires. It's got they just to me they ruined the fender around the tire. It to me it looks like a Chevy truck with the way that goes up and angled. It's not quite as square as a Chevy truck. They've got one more angle in there, but the way the fender extension comes out to me, that just screams Chevy pickup truck to me. Man, I don't like those.
Well,
I
see,
don't like
now I can see what you're talking about, and I have not been able to really look at that component of it. And I agree with you; it's way too chiseled looking. It's
yeah.
one of that phrase, the trying too hard thing, like, oh, let's chisel the front. Well, let's chisel the back. The thing that I think they massively overdid, and I'm changing courses here too because I liked it when it came out. I thought, well, isn't that fresh? Go back to that front end. They so overdid the H's.
Yeah,
The headlights are H's. The grill is one big broad H. There's H's inside in the door panels. There's H's in the console. They they so overdid the eighth letter of the alphabet. I can't see anything but a group of H's coming down the road when I see that car, and
yeah.
it's turning to me.
Yeah, I like
Pickup.
it. I like it over. I like every view except for I cannot stand the fenders. That's the thing that I just that was not on the original concept, and to me it looks like pickup truck fenders
Yep.
on an SUV, and it just ruins the fluid nature of the design. You look at a Land Rover versus that, and so yeah, I have to agree with you, Steve. I think they missed the mark on those.
It reminds me of, and I have quoted this before, but Car Magazine, which we all love, such a great magazine. They were reviewing something, and I forgot what it was, but they have the summary, pro, con, and then the summary. And the pro was the design broke the mold, was the pro, and then con was ugly, and then they put in parentheses. It did break the mold after all, close parentheses. So, you could be different, but you can be too different. So it's not terrible, but I
They'll still
just
sell a ton of them.
yeah,
They will
yeah.
sell a lot.
But I agree with Adams about the H's. It's like this, it's fatiguing to look at all the H's.
It's kind of in a way, and I know we're getting toward the wrap up here, but when the Ford Taurus came out, it was such a handsome sort of like subtle design. It sort of snuck up on you. It took a few years for it to be popular, and then whatever year they went to the ovoid looking design, and they made the grill
Yeah.
and headlights an oval, and the doors an oval, and everything was an oval. It's just like, just calm down, calm down. Too much of a good thing is a bad thing. Just just reel it in a notch. But I feel like Hyundai has sort of stepped in that particular design language.
It's a fine line, isn't it, Adams? Because when
Yeah.
the 1986 Taurus came out or 85,
Oh,
it
good one.
was so different. It was so different. And yet people liked it right away. People took to it. When it came out, the new one came out in 96, it was also different, but people did not take to it. And it's funny, the great line from This Is Spinal Tap, where they were talking about their music, and he said, the drummer, I think, said there's a fine line between smart and stupid. And somehow I think he's right.
Yeah. There really is. It would be harder to define exactly how much is too much for your intended market because now you're into subcategories and stuff. But anyway, I feel like the Hyundai is a handsome enough design for the era. I don't think it'll age well.
Yeah. All right. We'll leave that as the last word. All right. Close us out, Stefan.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Remember to subscribe. That way you'll, depending on what app you have, you'll get a notification that we have a new episode. It'll be coming every couple of weeks. And you guys have a great week. I'll catch up with you.